Hey everyone, my name is Rich Cardona, and today I'm going to walk you through the very beginning of your podcast ideation process. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to go through A to Z, and this is going to be for a podcast that I'm creating from scratch. Now, a little bit about me before we begin is I am a podcast producer. I have a company called Rich Cardona Media. We have an amazing team that are serving amazing clients that have some of the world's top ranked podcasts. And about a year ago, or a little bit more than a year, I stopped podcasting to focus on the clients. So I've not been a practitioner. It's time to get back in the game. And the realization that kind of pushed me over the edge to get back in the game in terms of podcasting myself, which may be something that is of interest to you, is to have something that is a content machine, making all the short form content and hoping Instagram or something would pop, or just getting algorithmically pushed down on LinkedIn because I was making really niche content. Like, it doesn't make you feel good. And I realized I was chasing numbers for ego. I've had success as a podcaster on two different shows that were globally ranked, and we've had much success for our clients, but it doesn't help you if I'm not recording the process or if I'm not demonstrating. So I looked at this as a perfect opportunity to just kind of get back in and document the process. Now, I have no script. I have no actual agenda. I will get into some of the gear at some point, but you don't need any of this. I would literally do this if I just had a webcam and, a cheap lavalier mic that you could plug into the computer or to myself. I would even do this on a phone if I wanted to. No script, no agenda. This is just kind of like pushing past perfect and just recording. So we're going to get into ideating your podcast. Okay. So the first thing I think you need to ask yourself is this: do you want a solo podcast, something like this where you're talking directly into the camera, or do you want an interview style podcast? I actually want to do interview style podcasts, and I'll get into that in a second, but interview style podcasts really energize me. So it's just important to know that, because then when you get into that decision, you're going to have to ask yourself, okay, do you want to do it in person or do you want to do it virtually? Now, many people are going to say virtually, and a lot of people would not put in the time and effort to try and go to their guests. That is what I'm trying to do a little bit different here, and you're going to see that. So I have an untitled Google spreadsheet over here. I'm going to walk you through exactly some of my thoughts on what I want to do, real time, nothing prepared, and we're just going to do this. And these are some of the things that I think are going to be valuable to you and for you to kind of gather your thoughts and ideas. Let's see here. So I got to figure out how to screen share. Here we go. So let's screen share. Unmarked tab. I'll just put pros, cons, list, pods, and I'm going to put April 2023 because you never know if it might change. Now, I'm just going to do pros and cons. I've already decided what I want to do. Now it's just a matter of kind of like flushing it out. So what I want to do, okay, and this is something a lot of people don't do, is I want to start a podcast here locally where I live in Wilmington, North Carolina. And the reason I want to do that is because I'm a total recluse. I love to work. I love my routine. I don't like to get out of my comfort zone. It's just like family, church, and it's working out and all that good stuff. But like making adult friends, dude, that's not my thing. I'm not good at it. I've noticed that when we go out and we have an exceptional customer experience at some of the, maybe a restaurant or a store out here, I'm like, man, I would love to like learn more about their business. And what better way to do that than podcasting or interviewing them? So I have to flush that out. Now, I will say I've talked to a couple of the owners and I'm like, hey, I'd be really interested in having you on a podcast. Here's my concept. And it would just be for local people to find out more about you, or for people who are thinking about coming to this area, this kind of Cape Fear area of North Carolina, to understand what's available there and some of the spots they could go. So you could look at it as a kind of travel or trip advisor, but in the form of a podcast. So what am I limiting that to? Not much. I mean, like, I could do 1 month that's focused on restaurants. I could do 1 month that's focused on childcare. I could do 1 month that's focused on gyms. I could do breweries. I could do anything I want. This is small business. I'm not going to limit myself. So I love having conversations with entrepreneurs. I love seeing the city grow, and I love new places that have great experiences. So why not share it? Is that good for the owner? Yes. Is it good for the business? Yes. Is it good for me? Yes. And do I get my reps in, and am I getting out of my comfort zone? Yes. So that's that. So we're going to go back to the pros and cons list. And this is, like, again, total generic. Like, I've not prepped anything. This is just like you seeing me do it as it happens. So what are the pros of doing an in-person local podcast? I'm going to put the first thing that comes to mind is mayor of the town. This is a concept from Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a very well-known entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, you probably know him. If you're a podcaster, you probably know him. If you don't, the dude has a massive media company. He has a talent agency. He's got a podcast. He's a prolific speaker. He started in Wine Library a long time ago, but he's just one of the probably thought leaders out there on marketing and business. And he's just very raw and authentic. But one of his concepts is being a mayor of the town or a mayor of the city.
If you decide that you, not the local newspaper, is going to be the provider of the content of the best restaurants, reviewing the school system, and every other nook and cranny in the 2, 4, 6, and 8 towns that you live in, you fundamentally start bringing value to end users that are intrigued or interested into moving into your town.
So part of the concept of mayor of the town is something I always like to say when it comes to personal branding. I always say it's not who you know, it's who knows you. So it's like, I just want to get known. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is I'm going to co-host this podcast with my wife because she is also an entrepreneur, but I'll get into that in a second. So the first thing here is mayor of the town. The second thing is networking, which obviously falls into the same boat, but you have to collect the dots and then connect the dots, right? So like as I collect the dots in my mind, as I interview more and more people, that will help get some introductions to other people who might want to be on the podcast, or other people who are just interested in media, or people who are interested in my wife's business, or people who are interested in my business. But either way, when you make connections and you start collecting the dots, then you're able to connect the dots and help people, or those people might be able to help you in some capacity you don't know. So networking out of my comfort zone. My comfort zone, as I mentioned, is home. I like to be home. I like to work from home. I like to be on Slack, talking to the team, and I like to be, on top of our client needs. I like to be ideating. I like to just be tearing apart our operations and processes in favor of just kind of pushing our business forward. That being said, like that's not helping me. Okay, that's not helping me as a podcaster. That's not helping me as someone who wants to get to know other business people in the community. That's not helping me whatsoever. So I got to get out of my comfort zone. That's absolutely a pro. That's not a con whatsoever. Logistics is what I'll put probably next. And in parentheses, I'll put video. So I'm going to need a videographer. If there's going to be guests and there's going to be my wife and I, then there's probably going to be 2 cameras. I have all the gear I need for those things, but who's going to do it? The reason this is hugely important is because like it's not easy. It's not easy to kind of set this thing up, and you want to focus specifically on the guest or the business or whoever it is you're interviewing. You need to be focused on them. If you are doing the dual operation of pressing record and sitting down and interviewing them, then you're going to be thinking about like, I hope that battery doesn't run out, or I hope the sound is good, or all that other stuff. We've been there. We did that. Even when we went to First Form to interview Andy Frisella, my wife came with me, and everything did not go smooth at all, and we had to do that, but I couldn't just fly someone out with me to St. Louis. Plus I wanted her to go see the facility and meet Andy as well. But I just remembered during that interview, I was pretty present, but I was also wondering like if my wife was encountering any problems, like would she have to interrupt the interview to do it? So we don't want it to be us. We want someone dedicated there. So what I did was recently I saw someone, our church is very big on like social media and like capturing and video and audio and pictures and all that good stuff. So I just asked someone who was walking around with a camera at our campus. I noticed her and I've seen her before. I go, do you need extra work? And she's like, yes. So we went and had a coffee, and I have someone who's lined up who could do the videography. Now, what you also need logistically for that is to have the processes in place. So you're going to have the processes in place. You should have a budget in mind of what it is that you can spend, what it is that you can't spend, and all that other stuff. Okay. So logistically, this is just for the capture, not post-production, just for the video aspect of it. I want someone there so we do not have to worry about it whatsoever. Now, I said I have the equipment to do it, but you could also literally use iPhones. Okay. Like the cinematic mode I've noticed on the iPhone 14, if you have a 14 or above, is ridiculous. Completely usable, very high definition, very high quality. Then you would just have the mic issue at that point. So I guess pros here, I'll put I have the gear. So that obviously like makes me feel pretty good. It's like, okay, I got the gear I need. That's not an issue. Interest. I already have interest. So that means there's a market for this. There's a market for people who want to be on podcasts locally. I mean, we've just kind of did a little analysis by just asking people. So we know the interest is there. Another pro is going to be content machine. Now, this is a little bit different. You might not have this expectation. You might not need a content machine, but I need a content machine because I hate making short form content, because trying to squeeze important points into 60 seconds is just not my style. Okay, I'd rather get granular. I'd rather try and tap into storytelling abilities. I'd rather provide more value. There certainly is an effectiveness to short form that cannot be ignored with growth and popularity or virality. But for us, it's never moved the needle as a business. So I'm going back to long form content, and long form content is a content machine. YouTube is a content machine. Podcasting is a machine, and both of those combined, which is even better. So what do I mean by content machine? Essentially, this podcast, this YouTube video can be repurposed in many, many ways. I could repurpose them for Instagram. I could repurpose them for Facebook. I could repurpose on Pinterest, which is everyone sleeps on Pinterest. I could get quotables, or I could get tweet-worthy lines from the transcript. I could get written transcripts derived from the audio of the podcast. I obviously could put this on YouTube as long-form content. I could put this on YouTube Shorts. I could put some of the cuts on TikTok. There's a million different things I can do with this that are just going to alleviate me of having to make dedicated short-form content. And when I say short-form content, in case you need a reminder, that's the kind of video-centric social media platforms, the type of posts that they want for their videos. You know, that kind of quick 30 seconds. I mean, it used to be 60 seconds, then it's like 40, then it's like 30. It's like, you got to be quick. But some platforms like TikTok are getting a little bit more kind of podcasty, you know, having up to 10 minutes for a video. And then obviously, if you haven't known, or if you've ever had an interest in podcasting, YouTube is really pushing podcasting organically, just by the nature of people who were videotaping their podcast. It is going. All right, YouTube is going. They had not invested almost anything into podcasting while people like Spotify were. Now YouTube's like, okay, time to get in. Now, the only reason that's super important to mention that aspect of it, if you want to have a podcast and why it should be on YouTube, is because YouTube is a search engine, the second largest one in the world, the first one being Google, which owns YouTube. So there's like the searchability aspect, but anytime a social media platform or a video platform like YouTube is interested in pushing something like that, then you use that. You use that feature, so they will reward you. The content machine is absolutely part of the strategy here. The other part is what I'm going to put here, which is helping you. You're just not incredible podcast information out there. I mean, there's so many tactics and tips and tricks and gear and videos, and like all that stuff matters to an extent, but like I don't usually see this kind of stuff. And I also don't see a lot of people talking about the real barriers to making a podcast, which is the insecurities, the self-consciousness, you know, the inability to have the time management to create content on a regular basis. So helping you, that's a huge, huge, huge pro. So I would probably actually highlight that to remind myself, in case our cons list is pretty big. That would be something I would always want to lean back on. It's like, it's helping somebody. Another one, let's see, we're at 9. I enjoy conversations. Okay. I enjoy conversations, and sometimes that's under the veil of, you know, doing an interview. But you know what? Like, if I enjoy conversations, I want to do more of it rather than making that short form content that I was talking about, speaking directly to a camera, just trying to do like 10 of those and batch a bunch of those and getting them edited and all that good stuff. Like, it's not that fun. This is not that fun, but I really, really want to make sure I'm documenting the process, so I know this is valuable. That's why I'm doing it. But anytime I'm given the opportunity, I absolutely would love to have a conversation and capture the conversation. Video podcasting to me is more like capturing versus creating, right? Like, I don't have to like script or anything like that. I'm going to go and I'm going to interview someone, and we're going to talk about things, and I'm going to ask further and deeper questions based off their answers. But I enjoy conversations, so that's a huge plus as well. So let's see. Is there anything glaring obvious that I missed? So mayor of the town, network. Actually, I'll put one. I'm with my wife. I mentioned that she'd be a co-host, but we are not the same. She is not super animated. She's soft-spoken, really into food and just curious and almost indifferent. But like, we have such a yin and yang that it works. And I think that would bring us closer. So that may or may not be a factor for you, you know, not the wife part, but like the co-host part. Like, do you have someone who you really vibe with and you guys think you can make some great content? Then you would consider it. If you don't want to do that and you want an outlet for your creativity and you just want it to be about you, then that's good for personal branding. That's just good for repetition and public speaking and just honing your podcast muscles, so to speak. But that's a big one for me. Time with my wife. Local equals no travel. The reason I have that is because we are all used to a Zoom world. Like, we got the Zoom fatigue going on, and anyone can interview anyone virtually. But I don't like to do that. You know, a lot of my most prominent guests, and yeah, I'm going to name drop real quick. Some of my most prominent guests: Gary Vaynerchuk, Patrick Bet-David, Shalene Johnson. I already mentioned Andy Frisella, Jocko Willink. Some of these people, you know, when I get the yes, the next thing I say is, I will come to you. anyone could do this. I don't want to be just anyone. I want to interview people in person. I already had it on here that it gets me out of my comfort zone, that I enjoy conversation, that it energizes me. So like, why would I not take advantage of that? So the benefit of not doing in-person podcasts here is that like, I don't actually have to travel. I don't have to get on a plane. I don't have to spend a ton of money to go and meet some of these people where they're at. That is another podcast idea that I'll cover in a separate video, but locally it's easy. My wife and I could literally probably do 4 episodes a week if we schedule it right, but there's no travel and it's still in person. So the local aspect of it is, I think, something that people are just not considering. This is a really good opportunity, like I said, to become the mayor of your town, to highlight your town, to highlight your city, and be a person that's kind of a go-to as a resource. I just put branding in there. And the reason I'm saying branding is because our company, we kind of want to like brand ourselves a little bit better, not just the full service video podcast agency that we are, but what about branding elsewhere? Okay. And we have a concept we like to call part-time podcaster, because no one wants to be a full-time podcaster. Not the people we want to work with. People usually have it as a hobby, or sometimes we even call it like the side chick, right? Like people enjoy it, but don't put their heart and soul into it. But branding wise, I think it's a good move for part-time podcasters, because then we could start a Facebook group, which we don't have right now. We could probably start a different Instagram channel. We could probably have a couple other places where there's no pressure. It's just giving valuable information. Like we don't need it to grow, but by nature, some of these things just grow because they're providing so much value. So the branding aspect of it and practicing what we preach and demonstrating how to be a part-time podcaster is probably a good opportunity to kind of resurrect or start pages on some of the social media platforms that we were talking about. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the content machine. I don't have like a ton more than that. That's it. So like right now I feel good, but the real deal is when you go to some of the cons, which I got to start listing out right now. And again, like this is not an exhaustive list. This is just what I came up for the video as we speak, but let's go ahead and check it out. I have no idea how these people will be as guests. Guest quality. Now, just because someone has a good restaurant, just because someone has a good business, just because someone has a good business does not necessarily mean that they're going to be a good podcast guest. And that actually matters a lot, because that could mean you're halfway through an interview and in your head the whole time you're saying, ain't no way I'm publishing this. And that happens. That happens. And by the way, that's just like a hot take right there. If you already have a podcast or interview style podcast and it is not good, you don't have to publish it. No one is forcing you to publish an episode where the guest just does not bring it. So guest quality, I would say, is certainly a con. I will put local is actually a con as well, in terms of who am I going to try to reach? Like some of this content that I make from the podcast, if we do it or when we do it, like it's going to be irrelevant to someone in California, someone in Texas, or anything like that. They don't care about Cape Fear. They don't care about the Wilmington, North Carolina area. So that's kind of a con. So reach might not be what I want it to be. If I really want the podcast to pop and I want to get some of these businesses of visibility that we think we could get them, then it's probably going to cost some money. It's going to cost some boosted Facebook posts or sponsored posts or anything like that, which is fine if we have the budget for it, but that's not what we want to go. We're very, very much organic minded creators on our team. So, if it's not popping and we had to throw money behind it, that could get out of control quickly, because if you don't know, when you start paying for ads and it starts doing a little bit better, it's obviously always designed to make you spend more and more and more and more. So that is a con, I would say. Let's see, just format or format 4 seasons. The problem I'm thinking of is if we did a kind of like May is a food month, right? And we were covering all food, then someone who's listening to it might lose interest if they don't care about the restaurants. They may care about other things. So what I mean is it might be misleading if we're covering the same types of businesses, but that's pretty easily solvable if I'm like, just for the month of May, we're covering food. We're going to be covering the top restaurants in the Wilmington area that we've heard of, et cetera, et cetera. Still though, someone might not be tuning into the podcast when you get to the season or the next month where I'm covering kids activities or churches in the area or sporting events in the area, things like that. So you just never know. And I'm willing to take that risk. It's completely fine as long as it's kind of building community and we're putting out good, valuable information, not only for the people in the local community, but documenting the process for people like you guys. Then it's hugely helpful. So cost of video and post. Okay. So I am not going to be doing the post production. Like my team would do that. And even though it's like my business, like that doesn't mean that there's not a cost associated with it. And it doesn't mean there's not a cost associated with the videographer or anything like that. So we happen to have reserves at this point to carry this out and put financial resources behind it, but it's still going to cost. Okay. So all of a sudden, if I start flooding the team with a lot of content, then they're going to have to determine where in the workflow the client is and where we are. Like, at what point do we become a priority? Because we're just obsessed with prioritizing the client. So the cost of video and post-production, that is a very real cost if you're not a business owner as well. Who's going to do these things? If you think it's you and you want to do the audio editing, and if you want to do the video clips, if you want to put it on YouTube and all that good stuff, that's completely fine, but it is a very easy way to burn out. It is a very way to experience pod fade, which, if you don't know that term, it's where people fade off and stop publishing or recording episodes. And that's usually around episode 7. So if you've made it to 10 already and you're watching this, go ahead and pat yourself on the back. And if you've done anything significantly more than that, then you're in a good place. But the cost of video and post-production is a lot. So I should have just added time. It's going to take time. Do we have the time to do this? Yes. Like, when I look at my schedule and what we've been doing, really focus on certain areas of the business, it does afford me a lot of time, especially because I have an amazing team to be like, yeah, I could go. And if I really didn't have the time during the week, I absolutely have the time on the weekends. We're spending the time going to our daughter's events and little things like that. It's like, of course we could have the time to go and interview some of those people. However, do we want to go to restaurants or businesses when they're packed, or do we want to go when they are quiet or when they're closed, so it could be a little bit more intimate? So I'd have to think about that. So it's not a con, it's more like of a question I would put: when open or closed? So some of these businesses that I want to interview or that I want to do, it's like, it could be cool because if they're open, maybe they'll let us take a camera in the back and we'll get some really cool B-roll or stuff, just happenings outside of the interview itself, extra footage of like things happening, customer interactions, client interactions, like, the chefs doing their thing or anything along those lines. Anything that kind of just gives you a good visual or behind the scenes of the business would be super awesome. So that's just a question. Like, would we want to do when we're open or closed? I wouldn't think it's a con, but let's go back to cons of time, costs, format, again, money in terms of like to support our reach, guest quality. Is there anything glaringly obvious? Anything glaringly obvious I could think of right now that is a con? No. So that's it. Clearly for me, the pros outweigh the cons. Okay. And we can look at them one more time if we need to, but like, I just don't see anything glaringly obvious. It doesn't support what we're trying to do. So I'll probably wrap here, but this all really outweighs this. Now, again, the financial aspect can be intimidating, but it does not mean you can't do some of the things yourself. Just know there's a proclivity for people to get tired of it fast. Okay. And then I have one simple question that can be answered. So that's it. Now, will I revisit this in 20 minutes or an hour or tomorrow? Probably, but that's it. This is it. So is it a good idea? Do I have any major constraints that would prevent me from doing this? Does this support me personally? Yes, it invigorates me. Does it support the business? Absolutely. Does it support networking? Yes. And the last thing I'll say is simply this. This is completely altruistic. Actually, let me add this. This is a huge one. Content for guests. Everyone wants content. Everyone wants content. Recently, we were working at a conference down in San Antonio for one of our clients. The client who was hosting the conference planned out some interviews, and the president of the company was interviewing people as well. And every single person that was interviewed, without a doubt, was like, are we going to get this content? Okay. They want the content. They want the content because it'll help them, or they believe it will help them. I mean, they just have a lot of different uses for it the same way we would, but we are taking the brunt of this. I'm not asking anyone we're interviewing to pay. Like, this is not a service. This is me asking you to be on a podcast. And by the way, the upside of this is you will get a video out of it. I will just share with them all the assets that we create. That's like a gift. So it's altruistic in many ways. And I have absolutely no expectations that they're going to do anything for us, but you never know. This could be one of those things where that business says, we could use some social media help, or we could use a content machine of our own, or, no one else around here is making a podcast about cannabis or whatever. So there's always a chance that they might need our services. Now, my wife, she has a swim school. She teaches little children how to swim. It's called Little Fishy Swim School. If we happen to go interview all the gymnastics facilities around here or something along those lines, then maybe, just maybe, the owner or the people who we interview would be like, oh, maybe we could have an affiliate program that we could send people to you, or you could send people to us, and they could bundle our services and get a discount because a lot of kids that we have here don't know how to swim. Or because maybe my wife has a little bit more of a slow season in the winter because it's cold and not a lot of people think about swimming. Okay, maybe she could be sending business to these gymnastics places, and maybe because gymnastic places know in the summer that kids want to be outside, that they could refer people her way to learn how to swim before the summer comes and whatever. So that's a huge thing as well. But we won't expect anything, nothing. Okay. We expect nothing. This is all about giving. Now, the law of reciprocity is real. So I would be surprised if people didn't try and hook us up. Like we would be patrons of a certain restaurant. Maybe we'd go and be like, oh, hey, it's you guys. Dude, we love that interview. Here's an app on us. That might happen. I don't expect it. I'm just saying the law of reciprocity is real. Anytime you give so much value to some people, they almost feel obligated to do something in return. And that might be an upside, but that's it. So I have the pros and cons of it. That's all I need. That's all we're doing today. We ideated. You should do the same. It really comes down to that, pros and cons. So look at them, list them. That's where you start, and that's where you could end for the day. And in the next video, we'll talk about what the next action step would be, which is probably to start lining up interviews. And I would document that process as well. If you want to continue to see some of these videos that are going to get you, podcasting in just a good, methodical way that's going to allow you to not feel the stress and the anxiety or any of those things, go ahead and please subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, do all that good stuff. We will continue to give as much value as humanly possible. And again, I did not prep for this. There could be a million things left out. But again, this is pushing past perfect and just doing. Okay. I need to get back in the game. I need to demonstrate being a practitioner, and I can't wait to do it. Thanks for joining. Later, guys.